Scott. Moving on. Moving on. And here's my number 3 pick. And looking back, I really don't definitely DeAndre Swift. You could make a strong argument for number 3, but this is almost a hot take to put Najee Harris at number 3 with Alabama. He didn't get a lot of carries last season because they had Damian Harris. Now that he's gone, Najee Harris is the star back. When Alabama cultivates a star back, good things are going to happen. We saw when Trent Richardson was learning under Mark Ingram, he got, maybe 90 to 100 carries that season when Mark Ingram won the Heisman. And then the next year, Trent Richardson was in the Heisman talk. And then Eddie Lacy was being cultivated at that time. And then Eddie Lacy blew up. Of course, none of these guys, other than Mark Ingram, made it in the NFL. But the point is, Alabama has a system of training running backs to integrating them into the offense, learning under the star back, and then when it's their time to shine, when it's their season, they blow up and they have 1,000-yard, 1,500-yard, even in some cases 2,000-yard seasons. And we even saw it with Derrick Henry, the last Alabama Heisman winner, when he was being cultivated. We saw Derrick Henry come out of nowhere and win the Heisman, blow everyone up. And at that time, Damian Harris was the running back in training, and then it was his year, and he really had 2 years to shine. And that whole time, Najee Harris was sort of in the background. He's coming out of California, amazing ability. He is very hard to tackle, and surprisingly, he will run you over. He's 6'2", 230, so he's not as stocky of a running back, but that is still a very strong guy. He's a dude he has the ability to run you over if he has to, but he probably would rather juke you out, and we have seen that time and time again. Looking at this dude's highlights, I encourage you to go check it out, because this dude's really kind of insane with what he can do. He will break your ankles in multiple ways. Last season, he didn't do amazing. The only notable stat here is a 6.7 yards per attempt, which is very good. Basically, what that means is if you're new to football, you have 10 yards to get a first down. Basically, just hand him the ball twice and win the game. You just hand him the ball every other down, and you'll win the game, because he will get 6.7 yards on average per attempt, which is ridiculous. That's throughout the entire season, which is unheard of. And that's out of 117 attempts for 783 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, which is look, if you look at that, you say, okay, if he's the star back, that's not very successful. But he had Damian Harris was the star. So he wasn't even the star back, and he got 6.7 yards per attempt, which is very good. Now going into 19 next season, he's going to be that feature back for Alabama, which we've seen sort of a shift away from the run game and sort of a power pass. Of course, Tua is going to be a beast, and they have all 4 great receivers. But you can't pass the ball every down in any league ever, unless you're playing like the school of the blind. No offense. You can't do that in most leagues. So you're going to have to, no matter what team you're on, you're going to have to run the ball occasionally, every other down, every 3 downs, whatever it is. Najee Harris is going to be a beast next year. He's going to be in the Heisman race, I think. He's going to be sort of that underdog that no one really knows yet. Of course, I've been watching SEC football, so I kind of know about him. But he's a stud. He is a stud. Really like the guy. He's humble, doesn't really talk a lot, quiet guy. I like that. I like that a lot. And we'll get into more about quiet guys versus loud guys later after the list. But now, you could switch up DeAndre Swift and Najee Harris at any point in time. The reason why I chose Najee Harris 3 over DeAndre Swift is because of the Alabama factor. And I believe that this is a thing. The Alabama factor exists. And because the dynasty isn't going anywhere anytime soon, it definitely exists. Like I said, the way that Alabama can cultivate a running back, and forget this new offense, it doesn't matter. The team culture hasn't changed. The way that they cultivate running backs is unheard of. Georgia can do it. They've replicated it. Of course, we have a lot of amazing backs out of Georgia. Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, a lot of great running backs out of Georgia. They do the same thing. So this is sort of a big running back program clash here. Alabama factor will take it because they will do better in the season. They will have more success in the passing game, which will open up the run game. The fact of the matter is, look, and Jake Fromm's a great quarterback. He has some really good receivers, but in the receiving core, they're not as deep as Alabama. So really, both aspects of the offense will be opened up at the same time for Alabama, whereas it won't come as fast for the Bulldogs. They have some really great weapons, and they will be able to do it with DeAndre Swift. But I think this is where the Alabama factor kicks in. And I'm going to have to give it to Najee Harris. And at this point, I really don't think that the stat difference is going to be noticeable. I think it's very arbitrary. In fact, if we see that DeAndre Swift has a way better season than Najee Harris, I would understand that completely. That would not surprise me at all. In fact, it's probable. At this point in time, but going into the season, you got to go with the Alabama factor and pick Najee Harris, an arbitrary percentage over DeAndre Swift. So that's at number 3 and 4. Let's talk about the number 2 spot. This is an easier pick here. These next two, an easier pick. Let's talk about it. So Travis Etienne, dude at Clemson, a beast. Okay, we've seen him a couple years. He's been to many amazing games that we've watched against Alabama in the national championship. Great college playoff player, really, which is a weird thing to say. But when you have a player that has been in some amazing high pressure games, that builds to your resume, and the NFL loves that because the NFL wants you to be used to high pressure, a lot of noise, a lot of eyes on you. Clutch performance. They want that guy. So it adds to his resume for sure. This dude has seen it all in terms of pressure. At his level, he's been at the most pressure that he's ever seen, and he's thrived in it. Definitely not somebody that nobody knows. Of course, last year everybody sort of heard of this guy. 24 touchdowns last season, and you want to talk about insane attempt average? Talk about Najee Harris with like 6.7. This dude's running an 8.13 yards per attempt. I'm going to let that sink in. At Clemson, okay? We haven't really seen a lot of great running backs out of Clemson, probably 2 or 3 that are notable. I don't remember any of them running an 8.13 yards per attempt average. That is ridiculous. It's only 10 yards to a first down, and you're taking out 80% of that on one down on average, which is insane. 24 rushing touchdowns to go with that, and you want to talk about a complimentary back. He's running the ball next to Trevor Lawrence, which is the number 1 on the Heisman list. I know that stat for sure. Number 1 on the Heisman list. He's hot off of a national championship, and next to him is Travis Etienne. Absolute beast, and he had a lot of carries. He was the star back. He had more carries than Najee Harris. I promise. More yards, too. So, no doubt he goes for number 2. And now you're thinking, okay, who's going to beat that? Who's going to beat this guy? And this is one that I probably not a lot of people know, because most of the people that listen to this podcast are SEC fans, SEC West fans, and I love that. Y'all guys are awesome. But if you know anything about Wisconsin football and that ugly, disgusting conference, don't hate me, but it's gross. This dude you probably wouldn't know of unless you know anything about that type of football. Jonathan Taylor, okay, Wisconsin. He's going to be a junior this year. This dude, I don't even know where to begin. I didn't even know him until I started doing research for this, because I just don't watch any other football. I mean, I don't watch Wisconsin football. I don't watch any of those teams in that conference, but unless it's like Ohio State, then I'll watch it. And if they're playing like a good team. So this dude has played in 27 career games. Okay. 27 career games. He's had at least 100 yards in those 27 games, except for 5. Okay. Which means he has run 100 yards in 22 out of the 27 games that he's played. Now that's just in the first 2 seasons. So in the first 2 seasons of his career, where he was the starting back, he has 4,171 yards in 2 seasons, which means he's got over 2,000 yards per season, which is insane. Okay? If he keeps it up, by the way, this dude's an All-American. If he keeps it up, he is on pace to be the leading rusher in college football history. I want you to really understand what I'm saying here. 22 out of the 27 games he has over 100 yards. He has over 2,000 yards per season. 4,171 yards in 2 seasons. That's ridiculous. All-American. Oh, and don't let me forget to say this. Going into next season, they have a first-year starting quarterback. This dude's new. They're not going to be well-developed in the passing game. This dude's going to see the ball a lot of times. He's going to see the ball way more than the quarterback will be throwing the ball. This is insane. This is like when NCAA was a thing, the game on Xbox or PS4 if you're dumb. I don't know. This is when you would make a player. You always make a running back because those are or I had both. I had a quarterback and a running back, but where you would make a player and go through like high school. They called it different things on different games, but you'd go through high school and then you'd get recruited and then you'd play in college. This is like that. This is what my running back stats would look like in 2 years. 4,171 yards. 22 out of the 27 games I played had 100 yards or more. This is like that. This is exactly what that looks like, but in real life. And he plays for Wisconsin, and his name's Jonathan Taylor. It is insane. I don't know how I didn't know who this dude was until I started doing research for this episode. A little insane. I'm blown away. This dude, no doubt, has to be number 1 on this list just because of the insane stats last year. And I really don't like doing this. I really don't like choosing a player for a list just because of the stats they've had in the past. The biggest catalyst for this guy going forward is the fact that the quarterback next year is going to be a first-year starter, and he's going to be seeing a lot of looks. When an offensive coordinator has a guy that's new to a system and somebody that's also in the backfield that is experienced in the system. He has 2 yards. He is a trusted player. It's common sense to put the ball in the hands of the more experienced player. Start to cultivate your new guy, okay? This dude's not going to be here next year. He's definitely on the Heisman watch. He's a top 5 Heisman candidate. Going forward, and we can talk about that in later episodes. But you can't deny that this guy, even with ignoring all of his stats, that's the biggest catalyst. Because with the knowledge of his ability, complemented with the knowledge that his quarterback is young, complemented with the knowledge that any offensive coordinator in their right mind would put the ball in his hands versus a young quarterback. It's that simple. So that's the list. And really, guys, that will conclude this series.